Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to MTGO Traders. My name is Taryn, and let's talk about Pauper for a minute. I don't know if you guys have been keeping up with the current Magic channels right now or the current meta as far as the formats go, but Pauper is making a huge splash in Paper at the moment. And that's all thanks to things like Channel Fireball making their GPs available to have Pauper as a side event. And of course, I think that was last week or the week before where they had over 200 members for their first Pauper side event, which is awesome. Now this video here isn't to like complain about prices. This video isn't here to like bash Pauper as a format. I think Pauper as a format is amazing. Everyone should play Pauper if you love Magic in general. And if you have an MTGO account, it is ridiculously cheap to start a deck right now. As Pauper basically got its start in Magic Online and now is going to Paper, I think it's a good time to just kind of talk about why it's really good for us and really good for local game stores to have Pauper in their own FNMs or in their own events. And I've kind of broken it down into 5 points for the video here. And number one for me is, of course, it is injecting new life into Magic the Gathering. There is a lot of, I would say, tension kind of in Magic the Gathering at the moment, and it's based usually around either Modern or Standard, or maybe even like Legacy bans or Commander bans for 1v1 Commander on Magic Online. We have the MTG Arena stuff to worry about. We have other stuff to worry about. There's just so much going on in the Magic multiverse, and it's really hard to kind of keep track of what we think is fun, what we think is not fun, what we think is stable, and what we think is balanced and open. Now, personally for me, I feel like Standard is a new height right now. It's so much better than it was like a month ago, so much better than it was even like 3 weeks ago. The meta is just kind of like busted wide open. We can kind of do whatever we want. Obviously, decks are going to float to the top here, but I do think overall the format has a great chance to grow and is in a great position to become something we really love by the time Dominaria hits. But if you're not into Standard, I can totally understand, I can totally relate. If you're not into Modern, I can totally understand and totally relate, thanks to things like banning and Storm being a thing. That's my big thing to like complain about with Modern. I just don't like Storm. Turn 4 wins, not a fan for me. I do think Pauper coming in as a Paper format now to local game stores, bringing in new life to a local game store, kind of like making sure that people who are tired of Modern, tired of Commander, tired of Standard, be like, oh wow, there's another format that I can play with my old cards from just bulk stock that I can actually build into a competent deck for this particular format. Pauper does that exquisitely well because Pauper, of course, is only commons throughout all of Magic's history. Of course, there are several cards in Pauper that are banned as well because it is like a decent format, but it is an official format kind of recognized by Magic the Gathering. One that isn't like Frontier, where it's just like it's kind of come and go or be like a cash grab situation. It's more like it's always kind of been here for several years, and it's finally kind of like making its limelight debut into Paper Magic, which is really cool. Number 2 on my list here is having a format that's wide open. A lot of formats right now, especially Modern and probably Standard eventually, or rather where Standard was like a month ago, we kind of had like 4 top decks, like All Energy, and then we had like God-Fearless Gift and Remnant Bread. That was like all of Standard for like 3 months. Modern is kind of in a similar boat with things like Affinity, Storm, other things like that. Obviously, Modern kind of shakes up its format every couple of months, which is really good for us, and it kind of injects new life thanks to new builds, new bans, things like that. But overall, Affinity is always going to be good. Overall, Storm, as long as it's not banned, it's still going to be good. And things like Grixis Death Shadow will just never actually die. But that's where Modern kind of comes into here. Let's go to MTG Goldfish. Right here we have the Pauper metagame. You have 10% on the top deck, which is Elves. Right below there you have 5-color Tron, which is of course at 8.79%. Below that is Mono Blue Delver. I mean, these are pretty decent numbers, 10%, 8%, 8%, 6%. I mean, that's pretty wide open to me. Let's go to the full layout here real quick. There we go. And of course, a lot of people are going to say, well, it's kind of a solved format already because it is on Magic Online and there are a lot of like good decks built within Magic Online. But I do think there are a lot of tournament grinders and a lot of pro players and a lot of just really good players that haven't really got their hands on Pauper just yet because of Standard or because of Modern or even because of Commander. And I feel like right now where Pauper is at a pristine position to be able to be a fantastic format for newer players, returning players, and players that want to inject new life into the system for local game store owners. Also, another thing is, if you're noticing here, I have it on online. Let's take it to Paper real quick. Since now Pauper's in Paper, well, let's look at the pricing here. We have $62 for the #1 deck in the format. We have $44, $66, $52. $123 is about as high as you're going to go for a Pauper deck. $123 is probably like mid-range, I would say, on a Standard deck right now. Let's go to Standard and just kind of show that off real quick. Let's go to Paper. #1 here is $318, you know, 3 times the amount of a Pauper deck. #2 is $233. #3 here is almost $200. The reason here is that I'm trying to point out is that Pauper is cheap, even though it has gone up in price thanks to it being very popular. And no, I'm not going to make a popular Pauper joke. But that's my number 3 point here. It's that it's creating a cheaper barrier to entry that isn't connected to newer sets. There are so many times, let's go back to the main cam here. There are so many times whenever I've seen like a lot of new formats come out or like a new set come out in standard and it just completely breaks a format. I.e. like Kaladesh block breaking the format for standard. Same thing for modern, like with when cards like Treasure Cruise and things like that in the cons block kind of came out, or like you know, Monastery Swiftspear when it made like red really good in modern. Obviously Swiftspear isn't banned in modern, but it shakes up the format so much that it's like completely changing it. And some people will agree that that's a good thing. Some people don't like that as much. I strongly feel like with Pauper itself, you're kind of in a unique position because Pauper really doesn't rely on new cards too much. Obviously there are new cards in common slots that are getting printed every single set, obviously. The thing for me though is that there are just so many good value cards that have already been printed that it almost feels like the new sets that come out probably won't be able to replace the old sets as quickly, just kind of like with modern, legacy, and even vintage. And that's where I feel like the local game store owner is really going to kind of excel from this, is that if they have a bunch of stock just laying around, that they'll be able to sell into this kind of like new interest into a new paper format. And that leads me on to like my 4th point here. Local game store owners get to sell dead stock to a new popular format. I know it's so weird to want like someone to like succeed and excel in life, but I feel like local game store owners really need like a leg up sometimes, and like Pauper is definitely doing that for them. Again, let's go back out here to the price sheets here, but like, I mean, seriously, like 60 bucks for a new deck in a format, like a modern deck, you could do that if it's a Rakdos burn deck or something like that, for sure. It's not going to make any like tournament listings, but a $60 deck for Pauper is definitely going to make tournament listings if it's in a like Channel Fireball like side event. And that's what I kind of love about Pauper right now. It's just kind of wide open. A lot of local game store owners have kind of dead stock just sitting there of, you know, like Ponder, Delver of Secrets, things like that from past sets that aren't really selling just yet. But Pauper's now kind of coming up in like popularity, and people are like, well, actually now we can just kind of start selling these cards and making some money back. There are so many local game store owners, I'm telling you, they just sit on dead cards and don't know what to do with them. They either just sell them on eBay to just like some big vendor, or they just have them in boxes and just lose money because they can't sell them. And again, I just feel like it's like weird to think that like Magic players are so against giving local game store owners money, even though they want to go to a local game store and have fun at an F&M. I think kind of having them make some money back on cards that are just dead stock in their warehouse is a good idea. That's just me though. And my number 4 point kind of boils into my number 5 point, which is selling into hype. And I feel like right now Pauper is at like kind of like a fever pitch right now for everyone to kind of get into it. I think Pauper's awesome. If you haven't heard about Pauper, it's amazing. Get into it. If you have a Magic Online account, I would definitely recommend getting into it because it's really cheap on there, obviously because it's Pauper, but also kind of getting the stock of the cards you need. You can get them on MTGO Traders, you can get them on wherever else you want to go. But it's a fun format kind of based around like playing out a threat and then having your opponent really not have like an answer for it just yet because like, you know, that comes on turn 4 or 5 maybe, or for common cards. So it really does kind of change the focus of how the game is played to where I feel like is kind of like a more pure version of how Magic was originally played, where it's kind of much slower, much more like methodical and more strategic, where you're having a lot of big battles with a bunch of different creatures on the battlefield. Now, obviously cards like Nettle Sentinel, Gush, Ponder, things like that, those are gonna be cards that are always gonna be good in every single format. And of course they're good here in Pauper too, and they're rising in price. But I think that's fine. I think that's just like healthy for any normal format. I think the big like kerfuffle right now is that people really just don't understand like what happens when a new format kind of comes up. Like a lot of people like to shut down new formats whenever they come to paper. Same thing happened with Frontier, but I feel like Frontier was at a weird disadvantage because it was kind of based around like wanting to make money. I feel like Pauper, since it's been here for a long time on Magic Online and now just now coming to paper, I think it's got a good position to where it can actually turn into something that's like truly of importance and truly something that could probably stay at your local game store. Again, that is just my opinion though. This is kind of like a rambling video. I just wanted to kind of get my idea out there, my points out there. But I want to know what you guys think, of course. Like the video, of course, if you liked it. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And I would love to have a conversation with you guys as well. Subscribe to the channel for more content like this, as well as deck techs and streams and all that fun stuff. And I'll see you in the next video.